Welcome to the Cloud Pod, where the forecast is always cloudy. We talk weekly about all things AWS, GCP, and Azure. We are your hosts,
Justin,
Jonathan,
Ryan,
and Matthew.
Episode 357, recorded for June 2nd, 2026. Cash me if you can now with durability. Good evening, Matt. How you doing?
Good. How are you?
It's June. I don't know how that happened. I swear yesterday was like January 1st, so it's just like
see,
this
I'm the
year.
opposite. I feel like last week was that when I think it was just you and Ryan was like 6 years ago.
Yeah. I mean, I have that going on as well, but like the fact that it's June, I can't process either, so I don't know. But it just feels like every day there's something going on in the world, or AI, or the day job, or people reach out to the podcast to do stuff. Like it's busy. It's busy. Which
Busy in a good way.
In a good way, yeah, for sure. Well, we have a bunch of stuff to get to this week, including Microsoft Build, which happened since last time we recorded, which we did not do predictions for because Matt forgot. That's how I like to think about it. But we've never done Build. So in fairness, it's just like we don't do Google I/O because they're both kind of like a little bit pie in the sky conferences or keynotes where they're like, it's the art of the possible versus things you can kind of predict. So we typically don't do Build or Google I/O for that reason. But let's still talk about it though, because they had some cool stuff that they announced.
Yeah, they definitely at Build, I feel like started adding more like Azure stuff, unlike Google I/O.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe at one point, but we'll figure that out in the future.
I mean, AI is blurring the lines of what cloud and development is anyway, so it makes sense that it's happening. Well, Microsoft has apparently canceled their internal cloud code licenses just months after encouraging widespread adoption, redirecting employees to GitHub Copilot CLI instead. This does not affect their broader Foundry partnership with Anthropic, but it signals that token costs at scale become difficult to justify internally. This adds on to Uber's situation, which happened a little bit ago, where they said they burned their entire 2026 AI coding tools budget in 4 months after internal teams were incentivized to compete on usage. Yeah, don't token max. It's a bad plan. The core economic tension worth discussing about AI tooling costs at scale can actually undercut the labor savings argument. When compute bills approach or exceed payroll savings, the ROI case for broad AI deployments gets more complicated for finance and engineering leaders to defend. Companies appear to be responding with tighter governance rather than full rollbacks, including usage caps, narrower approvals, and more targeted deployments focused on measuring productivity gains. There's also an infrastructure cost layer beyond software licensing as AI workloads drive substantial data center energy and water consumption, of course. I mean, the other side of this too is, the foundational models, Gemini and Anthropic, are expensive, and they do a good job, and they are great, but they're expensive. And so if you can use open models, you can save yourself some money. And so a lot of companies are also doing a lot of experimentation with open models like GLM, Qwen, Kiwi 2.6, etc., to see if there's different alternatives. And so, spinning up GPUs on the cloud that you then run an open model with could save you a lot of money. So this is going to be an interesting area to see what happens in the FinOps space as we start getting now more maturity in that area. Do we start seeing open models become a bigger deal and customers starting to look at different options beyond the foundational model? Because these things are getting expensive. Now, the whole Uber thing, I don't know what their budget was, but the fact they're only saying, well, we ran out 4 months early. So are you just really bad at budgeting? Or did you really overdo it that much? And I think it's about right, a little bit of both, but do take some of those claims at some level of bias.
Yeah, I mean, it's also the way people are using it, right? Like, I don't sit there and develop in Opus every single second, and especially they started adding the larger context windows. People don't realize how fast that burns your budget. And if you use it right, I think you and I have talked about it and others have talked about it, where you use different models in different locations, right? So if you're doing more of a project plan, start with the more extensive model and then dump down to the lower model for the more individual tasks that you're working on. But I do agree that these things are expensive, and I think reality is starting to hit, especially with GitHub changing their model starting this week, where it's more pay for what you use. And I think you're going to see the FinOps really grow in it, especially around, they'll probably start to have a focus output. So you can start to really see what people are doing, because I think a lot of people just are told, use more AI. And there's the joke going around the internet for a while now. It's like, you get a prize for using more tokens at work, but it shouldn't be that. It should how do you accomplish your work in a cost-effective and manner? It kind of also goes back to, was it Vogel's keynote 2 years ago? The Frugal Architect, might have been 3 years ago. I don't really have a sense of time anymore in my life. But like the same concepts apply here, right? Don't just throw everything at it. Target your code base. Don't just say, hey, go look at all the logs for production for the last 48 hours and find the one bug. No, say, hey, go query production logs for 750 when we had this error that told us the podcast starts in 6 days, not in 1 hour. Might be something I'm doing right now. But you got to use stuff in the most effective way. And right now, I think a lot of people are just, using, what's the phrase, a hammer for every solution versus, okay, maybe we can do something more targeted in this location that will save a ton of money.
Yeah, I agree. So not only, is Microsoft saying that AI could be more expensive, but TechCrunch had an article saying that tech CEOs are apparently suffering from AI psychosis. This was from Box CEO Aaron Levy coined the term. Describe how executives overestimate AI capabilities because they interact with polished demos and prototypes rather than the messy last mile work required to actually deploy and maintain AI systems in production. The layoff data is worth noting, with 115,000 tech jobs have been cut so far in the first 5 months of 2026, nearly matching all of what was laid off in 2025, with many companies citing AI productivity gains as justification. Even other business factors are driving the decision. Research does not support the productivity assumptions behind those decisions. A UC Berkeley meta-analysis found no robust relationship between AI adoption and aggregate productivity gain. And MIT researchers project agents will reach base competence on most tech tasks by 2029 and will need additional years to outperform humans. Harvard Business Review study identified a practical bottleneck problem. When AI increases output volume across an organization, the constraint shifts to the executives who must review and authorize that output, which can create organizational slowdowns rather than efficiency gains. And for cloud practitioners and developers, the practical takeaway is that AI agents still require substantial human review for code, contract terms, and hallucinated library calls. So keep that in mind as you're listening to all the hype.
Yeah, I mean, I think the world is not just, tech CEOs. I feel like the world's starting to get sick of hearing the term AI. I mean, we joke around about it on the podcast too. We're slowly becoming the AI podcast versus, the cloud pod. And I think people are using AI as an excuse to cut people, not always just doing it for logic's sake. There's a lot of other, things going on in the world that are causing enough concerns that companies are laying people off, and using AI as the excuse. It's just an excuse, I feel like, in a lot of places. And while it definitely can increase productivity, again, like I feel like I just said, you got to use AI in a smart way and in a targeted way. Don't use the hammer on everything. Figure out where it works and how it works, especially when you're getting into legal and other things. While it can validate things, you still need a human in the loop on a lot of things.
Well, we'll continue to see, I assume, layoffs. I mean, I think a lot of these layoffs that are being done on AI is also just general business problems. And so as long as it's a convenient excuse the market isn't going to punish you for, if you're publicly traded, why not blame the AI? I think is really what it comes down to.
Right. And it also looks good. Oh, look, we're using AI to make us be leaner and better. So it kind of ends up with a positive.
I mean, I look at the number of middle managers who are gone, who are being laid off of these things, and the span of controls that are getting increased. I'm like, you're eventually, when you do need to start doing other things, this becomes a much more complicated problem in the future, where now you're dealing with, how do you do performance management when you don't have enough managers to do the work? And so there's all kinds of things. I'm like, yes, it makes sense that you think this is a great plan, but the reality is that there's a lot of risk in these things. All right, move on to AI is how ML makes money this week. Databricks is introducing always-on pricing for Lakebase, its managed Postgres offering, which gives a 25% discount on baseline compute capacity while retaining full auto-scaling for traffic spikes, eliminating the traditional forced choice between provisioned and serverless database tiers. The pricing model activates automatically after 24 hours of continuous use with scale to 0 disabled, requiring no new contracts, no downtime, and no separate product provisioning. Databricks recommends keeping scale to 0 as the default for new or intermittent workloads, where load patterns are unknown, and switching to always on only once historical usage data shows a consistent baseline floor activity. Now through January 31st, 2027, you get an additional 50% promotional discount stack on top of the always on rate. which would meaningfully reduce costs for production Postgres workloads running continuously on Lakebase. This is a big commercial model change, and so something to factor into all your FinOps models around Databricks. That's nice.
I kind of like this model, where they give you the discount because it's been running for X period of time. I've always kind of appreciated that about the Google model. AWS, you have to say, hey, we're going to do a savings plan and whatnot, and you get that. And I know Google has kind of an equivalent, but just because it's running for, is it Google 30 days, then they drop it a little bit or something like that?
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah, like I kind of appreciate it's like it's less management, and it feels a little bit like they're just not trying to take money for the sake of taking money. When you have an EC2 instance running for 3 years, Amazon at one point just assumes that thing's going to be running, but they don't give you a discount if you're on demand. So it's kind of nice that they're kind of giving this benefit back to the people, to the customers.
Well, and it's, the reality is that a lot of the things that you pay for are the automation and deploying the server and updating the things. And so if you're not running those code paths and you're not running those architectures, then, the company is also saving money, which is why they can turn some of that savings over to you. But yeah, I mean, the ideal thing is you want to keep people sticky. And so if I can keep my stuff running, I think it's a good model, and it makes sense to me. Well, Anthropic had a busy week this last week. At first, they introduced Claude Opus 4.8, an incremental upgrade over Opus 4.7 with improvements in agentic task performance, tool calling efficiency, and honesty. Pricing remains unchanged at $5 per million input tokens and $25 per million output tokens, with a fast mode is now 3 times cheaper than previous models at 2.5x speed. A notable reliability improvement is that Opus 4.8 is approximately 4 times less likely than Opus 4.7 to let code flaws pass unremarked, and early testers report it proactively flags uncertainties rather than making unsupported claims. On the super agent benchmark, it completed every case end-to-end and scored 84% on online mind-to-web for browser agent tasks. Dynamic Workflows is a new research preview feature in Claude Code for Enterprise, Team, and Max plans that lets the model plan and run hundreds of parallel sub-agents in a single session. This enables code bases scale migrations across hundreds of thousands of lines of code from start to merge, which is a practical capability for large engineering teams. The Message API now accepts system entries inside the messages array, letting developers update Claude instructions mid-task without breaking the prompt cache, which is useful for agentic workflows where permissions, token budgets, or environment context need to be changed as a task runs. Anthropic previewed a higher capability model called Mythos, which they are also announcing is being expanded out to an additional 150 partners, making 200 total organizations across 15 countries now having access to the Mythos preview, which has apparently surfaced more than 10,000 high or critical security severity vulnerabilities across partner code bases, and partners are now using the model not just for detection, but also for writing patches and pre-release vulnerability checks. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like every week Anthropic is just on a roll, So, I mean, 4.8, I switched over to it. I feel like I saw some improvements, but, I feel like not that much. You read the internet, everyone was complaining about 4.7, but they complained about 4.6, but I would kind of also like to see them update some of the older models too. I'm going to call it the lower end models, the Sonnet and the Haiku. It's great that they keep improving the Opus model, but getting the Haiku, I think Haiku is on 4.5 still, and Sonnet's on 4.6. Getting those a little bit more updated with new training models and everything, I think would be nice. So I would like to see that, I guess, is kind of my feedback. Like, yes, it's an incremental upgrade, but I would like incremental updates because I'm trying to use Sonnet more. I don't need the power of Opus on everything, because especially, we talked about how expensive it is.
Yeah, I mean, so it's been interesting because I typically don't use Opus that often, but because of this new capability around dynamic workflows, I've been playing with a little bit more than usual, and so it's interesting because I can see the value, and if the price would come down on it, it could be huge. But I do try to use Sonnet as much as possible to kind of help keep things cheap and cost effective for what we do around here. But I also do a lot of experimentation with open models. I mean, most of the code I now write for Bolt, I actually use GLM 5.1 for. I don't typically use the Claude model for that, mostly because I have work stuff I'm doing. I don't want to use my work tokens for my personal project. That'd be bad. And so, yeah, I just use my personal Llama subscription and Cloud GLM 5.1. So it works great.
Yeah, I feel like with the 2 young kids that I have, time to do some of these things are less, so I don't quite consume all my tokens. So I'm like, here you go, Anthropic, have fun with my tokens for a while.
Yeah.
But when I do, there have been weeks that I get, kids go to sleep early or whatever happens, I get some time. I definitely consume it. And I have done like you have. I switched to Llama models, or I start doing more and more in Haiku, which then I hate myself in the future for a little bit. But
I mean,
yeah.
Haiku's fine if you know exactly what you want it to do and you don't want it to think in any way, shape, or form. Then Haiku is great.
Yeah.
It can templatize anything. But if you're trying to make it think, don't try that. That's
Yeah,
bad.
no, it's bad news bears across the board. I have not played with the dynamic workflows though, so I'm gonna have to spend a little bit of time
It's
on
worth
that.
spending some time with. I was pretty impressed with its capabilities, to be honest. So I would definitely recommend checking that out.
Yeah, I missed that announcement this week until we were prepping for the podcast an hour ago.
I understand. It's news is coming fast and furious. Anthropic, as just mentioned, is releasing a lot of code and features, but they're also burning a lot of money. And so they have raised a Series H at $65 billion raise, which is about a $965 billion post-money valuation, with run rate revenue crossing $4.7 billion earlier this month, reflecting substantial enterprise adoption of Claude across global organizations. I mean, that's a crazy number. Just absolutely mind-boggling how much money they are raising and what their post-money valuation is. And I was seeing someone talk about it on Blind. They were saying, if you joined, 2 or 3 years ago, I think, when they did the Series D, and you got 100,000 shares, basically with this valuation, those are worth like $20 million now. I'm like, damn it! I wish I had gotten into Anthropic. So. Yeah, it's going to be interesting when they go public, because they did also file a secret S1 this week, which we aren't talking about today because I can't look at it because it's a secret. But the fact that they are going to go public along with a bunch of other AI companies this year will be a lot of interesting conversations for us here on the show. But a lot of these people who have built these companies are going to make a lot of money potentially in an IPO. And then if you're making $200,000 to $300,000 a year and you have $20 million on your IPO, are you still doing that job? I don't know. It's a question mark.
I mean, I know a couple people that made some good money on, some companies that IPO'd, was it like during COVID or before COVID? I felt like there was a large slew of IPOs that occurred. And a lot of them took the money, got the money, but they didn't cash out. So while they had it, it worked well, but either they cashed out part of it or didn't diversify and whatnot, and the stock went up and down. It was kind of all over. So I think a lot of people still will work, especially if you've been in, Anthropic for, honestly, I feel like if you're a live engineers, like you just like what you do. Maybe you cut back or you go join a startup that's, or a different company that's a little bit less pressure, but I have different opinions about that.
I mean, if you have that kind of money, do you just go start another company,
Right.
doing things that you enjoy doing at Anthropic? I don't know. It'd be interesting to see kind of how, once a bunch of new millionaires are minted in the Bay and these other places, what happens. So
I feel like you need to see like LinkedIn does it every month, I think, or they used to do it, where like they would show you who's going where. And it would be interesting to see in 5 years, people that were at Anthropic, 3 years prior, 2 years prior to IPO, where they all end up. Kind of see that mapping of it. I don't know if they still do that, like who moved where for what jobs, but it was always interesting to see.
yeah, I remember seeing that, but I don't know if they still make that or if that's a third party stuff you don't get. But yeah, I remember that view. That was kind of neat.
Yeah.
Moving on to cloud tools, we're talking about Gremlin today, which is always fun. Gremlin failure flags by proxy let teams run fault injection tests on serverless applications by routing traffic through a sidecar container requiring zero code changes to their application itself, addressing a longstanding gap where serverless platforms lack the infrastructure level access needed for traditional reliability testing. This new proxy approach supports common failure scenarios like dropping availability zone-specific traffic, injecting latency, and generating exceptions to test error handling logic. It works across Kubernetes, AWS Lambda, AWS ECS, and Pivotal Cloud Foundry. The intelligent health checks automatically establish baseline metrics for network throughput, latency, and error rate, then halt tests if any metric exceeds its threshold during a test run. The practical value here is that your team can validate failure modes in serverless environments that were previously difficult or impossible to test, such as bad API responses, corrupted payloads, and message ordering issues. This new no-code deployment model lowers the barrier for teams that want chaos engineering coverage without modifying application code or waiting on development cycles to instrument SDKs. Which, I mean, a sidecar is a great way because you can basically proxy everything man in the middle style and inject all kinds of fun things. So this is a nice enhancement to the Gremlin platform if you or trying to do chaos engineering. Although AI does a pretty good job causing chaos engineering too.
I was gonna say, you and I doing the bold pod, we cause some chaos engineering on that thing on a weekly basis.
Yes, we do.
I mean, I always love chaos engineering, but I feel like so few companies get the time, effort, and buy-in to do it. As an engineer in me, I'm like, this is awesome. As a management person, I'm like, okay, but what project do I punt out to do this? When our platform does have high availability, and while this is something nice, you don't always get time to go do these things. As a SOC, right? So you got to do your yearly DR test, and that's like prying, time out of the PM org's cold dead hands in order to get the time to do the things you have to do. So your compliance team doesn't yell at you. So doing something like this, I feel like you are less likely to get time for.
Yeah,
but you got to figure out how to sell it.
Yeah, I mean, most companies care about the features. They care about shipping the features. They don't care about making the feature reliable unless they're in a business that require, it's a life and death situation, or it's, huge amounts of money for downtime. That's where typically you see a mature chaos engineering process. But for everybody else, it's very much, not something to get budget to do unless it's easy and cheap and free. All right, let's move on to AWS. AWS is announcing the next generation of Amazon OpenSearch serverless, which scales from 0 to thousands of requests per second and back to 0 when idle, offering up to 60% cost savings compared to provisioned OpenSearch service clusters sized for peak capacity. The new generation provisions resources in seconds and scales capacity up to 20 times faster than previous generation, supporting full text search and vector search collection types with an express create option that requires no manual configuration. Native integrations with Vercel and Kiro allow developers to deploy search and vector backends for AI agents directly from those platforms. And the OpenSearch agent skills repository provides pre-built domain knowledge and multiple step execution logic for common agent workflows. Pricing is consumption-based using OpenSearch compute units for indexing, search, and GPU acceleration. The storage built separately per gigabyte month. The classic OpenSearch serverless infrastructure remains available for existing users who prefer it.
Yeah, I mean, getting these serverless to go down to 0 and with the response time as fast as possible is always great. So seeing them continue to make improvements here just means that the average consumer that's just running a small OpenSearch cluster is gonna get the savings out of it. The large business that's running it, they're probably running it with enough other things. But let's say we were running OpenSearch for the podcasts, it probably would sit idle 90% of the time. So these savings are real if you can actually get them to that point. But I feel like forever the ability of these systems to actually scale down to 0 was minimal. Even Aurora never, I felt like, truly scaled down to 0 unless if you truly had your application made sure that there was no open sockets anywhere to the system. So this type of scale up capability, especially with it going faster, is just going to be really good for potentially production workloads too.
I agree.
There are a lot of cloud cost management tools out there, but only Archera provides insured commitments. It sounds fancy, but it's really simple. Archera gives you the cost savings of a 1 or 3 year AWS savings plan with a commitment as short as 30 days. If you do not use all the cloud resources you've committed to, Archera will literally cover the differences. Other cost management tools may say they offer insured commitments, but remember to ask, will you actually give me my rebate? Archera will. Check out thecloudpod.net/Archera to schedule a demo today.
All right, AWS Shield Advanced now provides packet-level DDoS attack flows logs, capturing source and destination IPs, ports, protocols, packet counts, and source country data during active attacks, published to S3 CloudWatch logs for Data Firehose at 5-minute intervals. I mean, thank you. You only took 100 years to get us this quality of life improvement. So I appreciate it, but I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this one.
No, I mean, this is truly just a quality of life. Somebody pointed Kiro at this tool and said, how many people have built this solution? Great, let's go actually fix the problem now, which is amazing. So it's much better to be able to get that data, especially when you are in the middle of a situation, than being like, well, it's just blocked at the edge. So there's not much we can really do about it. We don't even see it.
Amazon has deployed a new networking architecture called RNG, or Resilient Network Graphs, in data centers since late 2024, starting in Dublin and expanding to Germany and Spain, with most newly built data centers now using this RNG design. RNG uses a quasi-random flat network topology that eliminates the traditional fat tree hierarchy of switches and routers, addressing long-standing inefficiencies in data center cabling and routing that have persisted since the mid-1980s. The reported performance numbers are notable: 69% fewer routers and switches, 33% higher data throughput, 40% reduction in network power consumption, and 27% lower operating costs compared to traditional network devices. A key hardware component is the Shuffle Box, a new optical device Amazon developed internally that physically organizes and shuffles cable connections between routers, replacing the tangled cable bundles typical of fat tree setups with more structured physical layouts. Notably, Amazon says RNG is not optimized for AI training workloads, which require more coordinated and centrally orchestrated data patterns. So this is primarily an efficiency improvement for general cloud infrastructure rather than direct response to AI compute demand. I mean, in general, like anytime you hear from GCP or Azure or Amazon about their networking, it blows your mind. And so, the fact that you got away from, the tree leaf fat tree setup is great. I mean, there's a lot of inefficiencies of that model, lots of central bottlenecks. And so, in a situation where every customer has their own VPCs, the reality is the network has to constantly morph and evolve. And so it's good to see they've done this. And I'm glad to see that this is solving a big problem for them, fully powered by the fact that they have ASICs that can custom do this work.
Yeah, I mean, I assume a lot of this is their custom hardware that they're able to set up. And the bottlenecks, I never truly thought about it. When I built a data center back in 2012 was probably the last data center rack I really built out, was you had your switches in each rack that went up to a core centralized switch, and there was different switches for storage and for network flow, and then the end users, and they all merged up into different areas, but there was still a core switch in there, and that's not logical in a multi-customer, multi-tenant with the abstracted networking layer out. So being able to really rebuild the network kind of from the ground up and get rid of that 1980s philosophy, that's amazing that they were able to do it. And getting those improvements is going to be awesome. So it's probably just things that we all are getting the benefits of, and Amazon's taking the profit on the back end, but it's just going to be faster for everyone.
Amazon RDS for SQL Server supports Bring Your Own Media. Now, for those of you who were like, what? This isn't what it sounds like to install SQL Server. This is really about Bring Your Own licensing. So Amazon RDS for SQL Server now supports Bring Your Own Media, allowing customers to reuse existing Microsoft SQL Server licenses, including software assurance through Microsoft's license mobility program when migrating to RDS. This feature directly addresses a common migration blocker where organizations were either paying for duplicate licenses or waiting for existing agreements to expire before moving to a managed database service. BYOM integrates with AWS License Manager, giving customers a centralized way to track SQL Server license usage across their AWS environment and maintain license compliance. The feature targets customers running SQL Server on-premise, on other clouds, or as self-managed instances on EC2 who want the operational benefit of RDS, such as automated backups, high availability, and monitoring without additional licensing costs. Pricing for BYOM differs than standard RDS SQL Server pricing, so customers should review the Amazon RDS for SQL Server pricing page before making a change.
I just want to point out that I don't know that anybody is ever actually in compliance with their licensing agreement.
I mean, it's, considering how often they change it, that is a true statement for sure.
I mean, it's a great quality of life that somebody cares about, and I avoid Microsoft SQL, I would say, as much as I can, but I've dealt with it a lot in the past, and that's just where the world is. But being able to move it and the license mobility and everything is definitely useful. So it's a great quality of life improvement.
Agree. I mean, I feel like they had this and they lost it and then they have it back. It's kind of nice. Like, it definitely is a big blocker to using things like Cloud SQL or RDS when you couldn't use your licensing that you've paid for. You do have to have licensing mobility, which they do charge extra for, which is still annoying. So you don't have to pay for in Azure. So it's still not quite resolving that issue, but it's definitely getting closer to a better place for Microsoft customers, which is good.
Yeah, wasn't Microsoft getting sued in the EU for that? And I wonder whatever happened with that lawsuit. Do you remember?
I mean, I think it got settled, and they
Okay.
agreed to do some special things in EU that they don't do anywhere else to solve that.
Okay.
But, yeah.
That's nice.
Elasticache for Valkey now supports durability via multi-AZ transactional log, allowing it to serve workloads where data loss is unacceptable. Which I should be using Valkey, not just traditional caching scenarios. 2 write modes are available. Synchronous writes guarantee 0 data loss at single-digit millisecond write latency, while asynchronous writes maintain microsecond latency with potential loss window of up to 10 seconds and come at no additional cost. Both options preserve microsecond read latency, meaning customers do not have to trade read performance for durability, which is a meaningful distinction compared to traditional durable databases. AWS specifically calls out AI-oriented use cases like agent long-term memory, RAG knowledge bases, and workflow state management, positioning Elasticache as a viable primary store for latency-sensitive AI applications rather than just a cache layer. This feature is available to you in any commercial region, China and GovCloud, where Valkey 9.0 is available.
I understand the use cases. I still say you're using a cache wrong. Like, I totally get why you could use this with, like you're in a Claude coding session or whatever. But at the same point, it's a cache. It's okay. Unless if you're going to do something like, okay, we've cached a ton of, our data, and rebooting the cache or having to reload the cache would kill our SQL database to the point of no existence. Like, that's the only other use case I could think of. But at that point, how do you trust the data in the cache to start off? So I do like the synchronous writing modes, though. That aspect of it, to ensure that consistency, that is nice, especially with multiple nodes, because then you make sure you're actually returning the right data.
Exactly. All right. The Cur 2.0 now matches Cur 1.0's Athena and Redshift integration capabilities, closing a feature gap that had been a barrier for customers considering a migration to the newer report format. When selecting Athena or Redshift integration, exports are automatically delivered in an optimal format, either via Parquet or gzip, along with infrastructure templates, table definitions, and data loading instructions, removing the need for manual configurations or custom ETL pipelines. Cost data refreshes in Cur 2.0 are automatically reflected in Athena and Redshift tables, meaning customers can query up-to-date billing data using standard SQL without building or maintaining additional data pipeline infrastructure. Pricing of this feature follows existing costs for underlying services, S3 storage for exports, Athena query costs at $5 per terabyte scanned, and Redshift cluster or serverless costs depending on the query engine chosen. Feature available to across all commercial AWS regions, but excludes GovCloud US and China regions.
All right, so this is just, I misread this article when it first came out. It's really just feature parity between 1.0 and 2.0. Because
it's been missing though for a while. Because I know I've used Cur 2.0 and I had to build my own pipeline for this, which was annoying because it was there for Cur 1.0.
Right.
And so, I built this pipeline a couple of times to use the newer format because it's much better. But this is actually even better because they've kind of automated some of the other sharp edges of dealing with the Cur, like the pricing lists and that stuff, and the automatic index updates for Athena. So this is a nice quality of life improvement. But yeah, it is annoying because it didn't exist, but it is a little bit of catch up for something they lost when they moved to Cur 2.0.
Yeah, what I didn't realize, and I've seen a bunch of curl reports in the past. I've yet to see a curl report that is 5 terabytes, though. But I guess if you're processing it multiple times a day or daily, then I can definitely see it be a terabyte. But a single month, I've never seen a terabyte, and that was even with like a reseller account where we had tens, if not hundreds, of sub accounts that rolled up back before you had like organizations and such.
Let's move on to Google. Google AI Threat Defense is a new automated security system that combines Wiz for exposure mapping, CodeMender for code remediation, Gemini for AI reasoning, and Mandiant for threat intelligence into a single vulnerability management workflow. The goal is to shrink remediation time from weeks to minutes by automating the scan, prioritize, remediate, and monitor cycle itself. The multi-model approach is a notable technical detail here. Google explicitly acknowledges no single AI model catches all vulnerability types. So the platform uses multiple frontier models like Gemini Enterprise Agent Platform via the Gemini Enterprise Agent Platform to cover application logic, cloud configuration, binary analysis, and exploitability validation across different asset types. CodeMender is the code remediation agent at the center of the fixed workflow, generating patches directly in the developer's IDE or CLI, rewriting code to memory-safe languages, and automatically generating tests to verify fixes before deployments. It integrates with Wiz and a tool called Anti-Gravity to coordinate library dependency changes across source control and production environments. Wiz's context-aware pen testing agent continuously simulates attacks to validate exploitable paths during application layer or identity-driven risks. which distinguishes this from traditional attack surface management tools that only identify what is exposed without confirming actual exploitability. No pricing was announced with this one, but ecosystem partners, including Accenture, Deloitte, PwC, will handle deployment, ongoing management, and custom workflow integration for their enterprise customers. So I read that as expensive.
I read that as, here's my wallet, just set it on fire. I mean, especially because Wiz and other tools that they're leveraging are not cheap. So
Yeah.
I assume you're paying for all of these tools plus the additional, but it is nice to see them really start to bring that security ecosystem into a single, I really don't want to say this out loud, pane of glass and a single point. With the Wiz acquisition and everything else that they've done over the last couple of years, they keep adding security, but they're still kind of independent. And I feel like this is their first big, swing at merging everything together.
I agree. I mean, it was interesting. I wonder if there's feedback about the model not being able to handle each of these needs, if that becomes something that they try to train the models to do better so they can just use a Gemini or just a single model. That'd be kind of interesting to see.
I don't know. I feel like this is where potentially they might have custom models.
They could
for each of these independent things because they need to get that, pinpoint accuracy on it. Where, a Claude, just gonna go back to Claude Opus or, whatever, might not be able to pull that. I would assume they probably have a Gemini custom model, based on, whatever the latest Gemini is. I'm stuck on, in my head, went to OpenAI model numbers. But, based on the latest Gemini model, they then retrain or RAG on top of it to get more security focused models.
We'll see. I don't know, but looking forward to seeing continued development in the security space for sure. I do wonder if they're going to come out with their own Mythos type model at some point. I mean, considering the Mandiant knowledge that they have, you would think they'd be able to create some pretty cool security based findings and research.
Or they have, and they're just not telling anyone, which is what I kind of assume.
That could be too. Yeah. Google AI Studio now supports full stack app deployment to Cloud Run with either Firestore for document storage or Cloud SQL or PostgreSQL as a relational option, with the AI agent automatically selecting the appropriate database based on your prompt, removing a common decision point for developers prototyping new applications. Your users can deploy up to 2 full stack applications to the Google Cloud Starter tier at no cost and without a billing account, lowering the barrier for developers who want to test production-grade infrastructure before committing to a paid plan. Cloud SQL integrates using a new PostgreSQL Developer Edition that scales to 0 when not in use, meaning you only pay during active usage. Cloud SQL supports on the starter tier is noted as coming next month, so it's not fully available right now, but will be soon. Firebase Auth serves as the single login layer across the stack and enables Google Workspace integration, including Sheets, Calendar, and Gmail through a standard sign-in with Google Flow, and the agent handles provisioning, authentication, Firestore security rules, and database functions automatically through Google Notes. Users should review security rules before sharing the app publicly. When a project outgrows the starter tier limits, resources transfer to a standard billable Google Cloud project without requiring a rebuild, providing a straightforward path from prototype to production at aistudio.google.com.
I really like this. I feel like a lot of people are building these side apps or whatever from there, and they are not thinking about how do we actually make this thing be GA. I've seen a lot of like friends, oh look, I built this POC in Lovable or here or there, and I'm like, cool. That's gonna work for 3 people. How are you gonna run it for 30 people, let alone 3,000 or 300,000, which is what you're telling me you're interested in. So at least here they've kind of handled security, storage of the data. They put you in a decent starting point for a real production workload. Because what AI is great at is, hey, yesterday I did a hour-long quick POC to see if I wanted to do this thing at my day job in a web interface, and I got it up and I said, you know what, that's stupid. This is not the way it needs to go. But I had to build in all these different layers because my day job, I'm not on Google. So having this nice, easy place to say, okay, let's start with this and then throw these in as a quick POC to see how it works gives you that, multiple layer, with storage and authentication and all the things that you need. So to get to production, your barrier of entry is much lower.
Yeah. Well, and the fact that it converts right over makes it so much easier.
Oh yeah, that's fantastic.
Get from POC. I mean, I think this is an answer to Vercel, right? A lot of developers right now are doing POCs and building apps on top of Vercel because of how easy it is and how much they don't have to do. And so I feel like this is a direct response to that in many ways. So we'll see. Well, Nano Banana 2 and Nano Banana Pro are now available to everyone. I mean, I've had them for a while. This is basically the Imagen 4 and Imagen 4 Pro models, which are now marketed as Nano Banana, which I don't really understand why they did that, but
I love the name. I'm just saying.
I mean, I love it.
Why.
It's great, but I don't know why they're
fun.
even still calling it Imagen. Like, just retire Imagen. Just call it Nano Banana. That's what you're going to do.
In my head, it's Imagen is retired. It's just Nano Banana.
Yeah, in my brain, it's that way as well. But the problem is the API isn't Nano Banana, so it messes me up sometimes.
Oh, really?
When I'm doing things. Yeah, it's like Image Pro or something. But yeah, I've been using this for a while. Like I mentioned, the podcast covers are all AI generated now based off our show titles, and so if you haven't checked out our covers lately, they're a lot of fun. Especially me trying to figure out how to come up with good images for some of these. Like today's was a bit of a struggle because our last week's episode was named Holy Labor Displacement Batman, the Vatican weighs in. So I was like, how do I combine the Vatican and Batman and all these things together? And I think I came out pretty well on that this week in particular. But yeah, it's been a lot of fun doing these. And I also use the ChatGPT image generation as well. But most of the time I end up choosing an image because it's typically a little bit better or more in line with what we want. But yeah, I mean, I'm glad it's GA. I mean, it had some rough edges. It had some challenges early on, but yeah, I continue to iterate on our cover generator quite a bit to make sure that it works really well, and I'm very happy with it.
I just like the name. I'm not gonna lie.
All right. You don't like my covers? That's fine. I understand too.
I do like your covers. I don't look at them as closely as I'm sure I'm supposed to, but maybe we'll have to have BoltBot actually force us to and have it vote. But then, you know,
maybe
getting 3 of us on a podcast every week sometimes doesn't work. So maybe we should not do this via democracy.
Yeah, you guys really messed me up with the CloudPod's AI pleads not guilty, blames Philip K. Dick. That one took some work.
You're welcome.
And that one I was like, wow, how am I gonna get and the thing is, like, the cover generator, it runs a script to basically generate ideas, and then I can modify the ideas, or I can write my own idea if I have a better one. And then it generates a bunch of variations based on, like, with Bolt, without Bolt, with the host, without the hosts, etc. And so I had a lot of fun ones for these. I let you guys vote on them a couple times, like where I wasn't really sure, and you guys always kind of enjoy picking the one you like best, which is pretty good. Sometimes you guys don't agree with what I think is the best one, which is fine. I just chose yours when that happens, so it works out. All right, AlloyDB for Postgres now offers hot standby HA, where the standby node continuously applies write-ahead logs from the primary instead of sitting idle, allowing the database startup phase during failover and reducing downtime to approximately 15 seconds in testing. The key practical benefit beyond faster failover is post-failover performance consistency, because the standby node keeps its buffer cache warm by actively replaying the logs. The new primary serves requests at normal throughput almost immediately, rather than degrading for several minutes while the cache rebuilds off the disk. Yeah, this is nice if you need high performance with AlloyDB.
I'm kind of surprised that this wasn't there. Like, what was the standby doing at that point? I mean, I guess that's where I'm a little bit confused. If it wasn't replaying the logs, or was it like replaying the logs every like 15 minutes versus in real time? I'm not really sure, but it kind of felt like that's what the standby should be doing. I mean, RDS failover from primary to secondary I know they say it can take up to 5 minutes, or that's what they used to say. I probably should update my knowledge set to see if they've adjusted that. But for the longest time, it could take up to like a minute or 5 minutes. Something was normally like a second. You would drop a couple queries and call it a day. And
I mean, there was at one point where RDS nodes, they had the same problem where they would have to build from cache, and they, so there are, like, yes, I think other clouds have had this for a lot longer, especially in Aurora. But I think RDS had some of these similar pain points as well.
But that was like 10 years ago.
Yeah, I mean, Google's not that old. They had to take time to know that these are problems you have to solve. And AlloyDB, I feel several years behind, Aurora, because they kind of did Spanner first and wanted everyone to do Spanner. Then everyone was like, no, that's too much lock-in. Well, at least AlloyDB is Postgres compatible. So I feel like it's a factor of the fact that it's, multiple years younger than Aurora in some ways. Well, you also now have a new AlloyDB remote MCP server. This remote MCP server for Alloy gives AI agents a managed HTTP endpoint to securely query operational database data without the infrastructure overhead and local MCP server deployments. This is part of Google's broader rollout of 50+ managed MCP servers across its cloud services. So, I mean, managed MCPs are definitely all the rage right now. All the cloud providers are dropping them. I like this one though. It's kind of interesting. I don't know that this should be your primary interface to a DB at performance scale, but if you need a interface for an admin or for a user to do more ad hoc querying, this is way better than giving them select star against the database.
I always give my business associates select star ability against my production databases. Nothing bad ever happens, Justin.
Explain some of the outages you've had to deal with recently.
No, I mean,
I also gotta take a note to not let you write any SQL code for bolts.
you should never. No, that's just a given life choice. I could do infrastructure. I could do AI. I've never gotten into SQL, and I'm perfectly okay with that. I can do select star from, and that's it. You want me to do inner joins, outer joins, cross joins, whatever else? No. You want me to write storage procedures? It's bad news bears. I've always just let somebody else do it. My old team used to always make fun of me. They'd be like, "Hey, can you like go and do this thing?" Because I had permissions, and I'd be like, "How do I do that?" They're like, "You have to write me the SQL, whatever you want me to do." So SQL, not my thing. Writing SQL queries, not my thing.
I know enough SQL to be dangerous, but I can do a left inner join, I can do a right outer join. I know how that stuff all works, but I definitely enjoy having AI write my queries now for me.
I was gonna say, I just have AI do it. It's much easier.
Yeah, I need to query this data from a table. It's like, oh, here you go. And I'm like, wow, that was so much faster than me remembering the syntax. So I appreciate it a lot.
We've talked about in the past how SQL Studio Manager has AI Copilot in it. And while I don't know that I actually want that, I've definitely played with it and had it make me queries on the fly, because otherwise what I was doing was going to Claude or Copilot and having it generate the queries for me and then putting it back in and going back and forth in circles.
Yeah, I mean, I've used a Beekeeper Studio, which has AI built into it for that exact reason as well. And that was nice because it handles multiple different types of databases, not just MySQL or Postgres or whatever. It supports a wide array of databases. So that's been my go-to, which I've loved, and definitely something to use if you're looking for something for AI for other database platforms you might want. All right. GKA standby buffers address the long-standing trade-off between over-provisioning costs and slow cold starts by suspending pre-initialized nodes to disk, releasing compute and memory costs for retaining only persistent disk and IP address charges. This results in cost overhead in the low single-digit percentage range compared to full over-provisioning. Standby buffers resume 2 to 3x faster than provisioning fresh nodes, and when combined with active buffers, the two work in sequence, with active buffers handling the immediate spike while standby nodes resume to recover sustained load. Benchmarks show P50 latency dropping from 4 to 6 minutes to single-digit seconds under identical traffic conditions. That's nice, but I mean, didn't we talk about Amazon doing this not that long ago?
I thought it might have been Azure.
I think it was both of them did it.
Yeah, I thought it was Azure, but I could be wrong. I mean, it's just a warm standby pool, I feel like.
That's basically what it is, with some automation that was sort of lacking before.
Yeah. I mean, your P50 at, from 4 seconds to single digits, like 4 minutes to spin up a new node, that's where at that point, I don't always, while I totally understand scaling everything based on, CPU and memory usage and everything else, most workloads at a lot of businesses, and I'm speaking specifically from a business standpoint, are known ups and downs. Everyone turns on their work computer at a given time. You know what your workload's going to be at that point. So, while this will help in the situation, probably a lot of companies aren't going to leverage it right away.
Yeah, agreed. Well, Google has broken ground on its first data center in Horndal, Sweden, expanding GCP infrastructure into the Nordic region to support growing demand for search, Google Cloud, and YouTube services. The facility will use air cooling instead of water cooling because it's freaking freezing there, which reduces water consumption compared to traditional data center designs, and includes off-site heat recovery to support warmth to provide nearby homes and businesses. For GCP customers in Northern Europe, this expansion means lower latency and improved regional availability for cloud workloads. And Google has supported over 700 megawatts of renewable energy additions to the Swedish grid since 2013, as the new facility continues the sustainability focus, which matters for enterprises with carbon reporting requirements. So very soon, you'll have a new Swedish region.
I really like the fact that they're using the air to cool it down, but then not just venting it out the other side, but venting it to homes.
Right, which need the heat.
And kind of getting that double whammy. Right.
Yeah.
So while they are consuming power, I understand it's never, infinite power here. They are at least outputting some power essentially and saving power elsewhere in the grid, which is nice. So it's a good way to kind of hit their green requirements as they build out these places.
Yeah, that's a great solution. Azure has a bunch of stuff this week. First up, Application Gateway for Containers has now reached general availability, which integrates with Istio service meshes, automating mutual TLS connectivity between the gateway and mesh-enabled services, simplifies secure north-south traffic management in Kubernetes environments. The integration supports both upstream open-source Istio and the managed Istio add-on for AKS, giving teams flexibility to choose a preferred deployment model without changing their ingress configuration approach. The notable operational benefit is a single ingress path for routing traffic to services both inside and outside the mesh, which reduces the need for repetitive MTLS definitions and separate gateway configurations.
If I remember correctly from the beta of it, the biggest annoyance of this is that you can't go from a current app gateway to an app gateway for containers. They're different resources inside of Azure. So the fun part about this is you actually need to move and relaunch. And even though you tell customers to never whitelist your IP address on your app gateway, there's definitely always the one customer out there that does and then opens a Sev1 ticket. So great feature. Kind of wish the application gateway was all under one bigger umbrella, but I have other issues with the application gateway. So I'll just leave that as that. And look, we hit my application gateway complaint for the day.
Yeah, good. Perfect. So again, Microsoft Build 2026 just happened. And The Verge nicely summarized the 7 biggest announcements from their opinion. First up was Scout, the always-on assistant built on OpenClaw that integrates with Microsoft 365 apps, including Outlook, OneDrive, and Teams, handling background tasks like calendar management and expense reporting, and it's currently in desktop preview for Frontier customers in the US with broader availability planned. I mean, that's pretty cool if you want all your data to be leaked. So OpenClaw concerns still exist, so do be careful about that. Microsoft revealed 7 new AI models under its MAI lineup or May lineup, including May Thinking 1, its first reasoning model featuring 35 billion active parameters and 128 kilobyte context window. 128,000 kilobyte context window. The model targets complex multi-step instructions, long context reasoning, and code generation, signaling a continued push towards in-house model development rather than reliance on OpenAI for all things. Which, I mean, yeah, thank God. We were talking about this not too long ago that they really needed to drop some new models because their stuff is getting a little old in their process. But the flagship MAI Thinking 1 model is that reasoning model they trained from scratch with no distillation, which Microsoft positions as a clean data lineage option for enterprises and benchmarked even with Claude Sonnet 4.6 in blind human testing and matches Claude Opus 4.6 on coding benchmark. So it's not as good as the latest Opus, but Opus 4.6 wasn't anything to sneeze at. So it's not bad for an open model coming from Microsoft.
No. Yeah, I mean, I feel like I think last year I predicted a new model and the prior time, so it's nice to see them actually get a new model out there because it's been a while, like you said, and getting something out there that people can use, and honestly, them internally getting off of OpenAI, for all the I'm just saying Copilot star things out there. I'm sure for a long time they were using OpenAI and paying somewhere for it, so if they can run it all under their own model, probably going to be better off in the long run as a business.
Yep, I agree. Next up at Build was Microsoft Execution Containers, which introduces a sandbox security layer for AI agents running on Windows via OpenClaw, giving developers defined guardrails over what agents can access on a device. A companion app lets users configure their own agents or connect to existing ones with this controlled environment. So yeah, they give you a secure place to do it. I'm hoping like Claude and others will also adopt this for places like Claude Code can run, or if you're using some of the other Claude capabilities like Cowork, those can all live inside potentially this MXC environment, which would be a nice improvement.
Yeah, definitely this at a global level will be nice, not just for here. So I hope this gets picked up like the MCP protocol, and other things that Anthropic has built out to really help, because I always worry what Claude is doing on my laptop, even though I have it set to only look at certain areas. I'm like, do I trust the people that are putting their own guardrails in place to notify me that they're breaking their own rules? Because, I have to tell, AI, do not modify my tests to make them pass by setting it to return true. So, I worry about things.
And they also announced the Surface RTX Spark Dev Box, which targets developers running local AI models featuring NVIDIA's ARM-based Spark RTX chip and 128 gigs of unified memory with Visual Studio Code and GitHub Copilot pre-installed. The pricing and specs were not fully disclosed, but basically this will be a Surface computer designed to run local AI models for potentially using, their Scout product or others on your laptop, which is actually a really nice improvement because using a local model that you control versus a public model, like there's a lot of less data leakage concern there.
Yeah, it's an area I'm kind of curious. This is getting pushed for by, I don't know, government entities to build out, these open models that they can use. Or like, I feel like in the last 6 months in the world of AI, that feels like forever ago, I feel like there's more conversation around open models and running more things locally. And I don't know if it's the cost or if security, Ryan's not here so we can make fun of him, it's just being a pain in the butt in places, or if larger businesses and government entities are kind of forcing that forward.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a bit of both. I think it's, there's a need to do more local models, more local governments. The costs and availability of large, expensive GPUs is difficult. And if your workload isn't super heavy, having a local model that can do some of the lightweight lifting, like text editing and stuff like that, that's a big win. So I think that's what you're seeing. And then their final announcement that The Verge covered was Microsoft's Majorana 2 quantum chip delivers qubits rated at 1,000 times greater accuracy than its predecessor, which came out last year. We talked about it quite a bit about how they didn't release any of the research about the Majorana chip and all the new matter they supposedly created. But Microsoft predicts it could achieve a practical quantum computer by 2029 based on this new chip and what they're doing in their research side. So still skeptical on some of that one, like show the science, but definitely interesting.
It's definitely interesting and goes back to what I guess we talked about 2 weeks ago. Time to get your quantum computing cipher suites for security protocol, security communication.
Post-quantum security encryption.
Thank you. Post-quantum security. Yep. That's what happens when we record at 10 o'clock at night.
Yep. So the basically, all this kind of wraps up into their overall positioning around how AI alone won't change your business, but the systems that run your AI will change your business, is what Microsoft's basically claiming now. And it's positioning its entire agent platform as a 5-layer system covering build, contextualize, run, govern, and improve by integrating GitHub, Azure Foundry, and Microsoft IQ, Agent 365, and Microsoft Security Stack into a single workflow rather than separate tools. Microsoft IQ is a notable new component that grounds agents and enterprise data from Microsoft 365 business systems on the web via Web IQ, the frontier tuning allowing organizations to post-train models on their workflows and data while keeping that trained intelligence within their own environment. So yeah, Microsoft's not been waiting around. They're investing a lot of money to make AI a thing in the enterprise.
And they're hoping to pay it all back. I mean, I think AI has already changed businesses.
Mm-hmm.
The question is, how much more will it change it, and how will it continue to change it? Like we talked about at the top of the show, the cost of AI is not free, and it's getting more and more expensive as people use it more because it's all computationally heavy. So it's definitely changing the landscape out there now.
Right.
Now, given that they own GitHub and Foundry and IQ and all the data for businesses and SharePoint and all that, I just am concerned from Microsoft's point of view with the EU or potentially other places that are they going to run into an old, not monopoly, I guess monopoly, on the data, or get in trouble with the EU for kind of locking out their vendors over time.
For sure. Well, that's it. We're in it for another week here, Matt. I appreciate you as always.
I enjoy this. It's always fun. It's a little bit different with two people. I feel like it's just back and forth, where the third person, we get a little bit more conversation, but it's always fun to do.
Yeah, I always enjoy it. Well, I do appreciate you. You weren't here last week for me to hear my thank you, but I thought your guys' episode without me was fantastic. So thank you very much for doing that.
I thought you were going to rip it apart.
No, it was good. I even wrote some nice things in this week's newsletter comments for me, so you can see what I had to say there. But yeah, it's great as always. One thing I am trying to get us to 50 iTunes reviews. So if you have not written a review of our show on iTunes or Spotify or wherever you like to listen to your podcast, please do. We are pushing for 50 by the end of June if we can. So get out there, do it. If you've done it before, you can always do it again, especially since the last review someone posted on our podcast was from 2 years ago. So definitely looking for people to get out there and post some reviews onto our show. Helps people find it, and it helps us know that you're out there listening. So we appreciate you all. All right, Matt, I'll see you next week, hopefully with Jonathan or Ryan joining us.
Perfect. Talk to you then.
Another week of cloud news wrapped up. Bolt will collect the news. Justin will get the notes. Jonathan will write some code. Ryan will watch the perimeter. And Matt will reluctantly watch Azure. Till next week for AI, Amazon, Google Cloud, and Azure. And hey, maybe even Oracle, who knows? Check out the cloudpod.net for our newsletter. Join our Slack, message us on socials, or leave a review.